The words hit me like ice water to the face. You're just adopted trash, Emma. You don't belong here and you never will. My brother Tyler's voice was calm, almost casual, like he was commenting on the weather. But those words carved themselves into my chest with the precision of a surgeon's blade. I stood there in our childhood kitchen, the same kitchen where our grandmother used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, where family photos lined the walls like witnesses to a lie I'd been living my entire life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma Sullivan, and I thought I knew who I was. 26 years old, marketing coordinator at a small firm in Portland, Oregon. The younger sister who always tried harder, smiled brighter, and forgave faster. The one who sent birthday cards 3 weeks early and remembered everyone's coffee order. The one who believed that love and effort could bridge any gap, heal any wound. I was wrong about a lot of things, but mostly, I was wrong about my place in this family. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and old coffee, the same way it had since I was 7 years old when the Sullivans brought me home from the foster care system. Janet Sullivan, with her soft brown eyes and flour-dusted apron, had knelt down to my height and promised me that I was safe now, that I was home. Robert Sullivan, tall and steady like an oak tree, had carried my single suitcase up to the room that would become mine, painted lavender because Janet thought every little girl should have a purple bedroom. Tyler was 9 then, 2 years older and already carrying himself with the confidence that came from never having to wonder if he belonged somewhere. He'd been polite those first few weeks, showing me where the good cereal was hidden and teaching me how to work the complicated remote control for the television in the basement. But there had always been something guarded in his eyes, something that whispered temporary, even when his words said forever. Now, 18 years later, standing in that same kitchen with afternoon sunlight streaming through the checkered curtains Janet had sewn by hand, Tyler's mask had finally slipped completely. The careful politeness we'd maintained through high school graduations and family dinners, through my college years and his wedding planning, had crumbled like old plaster. It started with Grandpa Joe's funeral arrangements. Our grandfather had passed away 3 weeks earlier, and the family had been navigating the strange heavy waters of grief and logistics that follow death. Joe Sullivan had been the cornerstone of our family, the man who taught Tyler how to change a tire and showed me how to bait a fishing hook without squealing. He'd been the one to slip me $20 bills when no one was looking and to tell me stories about Ireland that made my eyes shine with wonder. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, creating a digital photo slideshow for the memorial service. Photo after photo of family gatherings, holidays, birthdays. Tyler walked in from the garage, still wearing his work clothes and carrying the particular tension he'd worn like a second skin ever since Grandpa's diagnosis 6 months ago. "You don't need to do that," he said, nodding toward my laptop screen where a picture of Grandpa and me at last Christmas dinner glowed warmly. "I want to," I replied, clicking to the next photo. "It's the least I can do. Grandpa would have loved seeing all these memories together." Tyler poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher Janet always kept filled in the refrigerator. His movements were sharp, controlled in a way that reminded me of Dad when he was trying not to lose his temper. "I'm sure he would have appreciated the gesture," Tyler said, emphasis on the word gestures like it left a bad taste in his mouth. Something in his tone made me look up from the screen. "What's that supposed to mean?" He turned to face me, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. Tyler had grown into the kind of man women noticed, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that never seemed to need much styling. But his face, so similar to Dad's, with its strong jaw and deep-set blue eyes, was wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, decided. "It means you're trying really hard to play the grieving granddaughter when we both know you're not actually family." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire neither of us could put out. I felt my stomach drop, that weightless sensation you get when an elevator moves too fast or when someone pulls the foundation out from under your world. "Tyler, what are you talking about?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just a bitter sound that seemed to scrape against the warmth of the kitchen. "Come on, Emma. You're 26 years old. Did you really think we'd all just pretend forever?" I saved the photo slideshow and closed my laptop, my hands moving automatically while my brain struggled to process what was happening. "Pretend what? That you belong here, that you're one of us?" He gestured around the kitchen, encompassing the family photos, the height marks penciled on the doorframe, the ceramic handprints Tyler and I had made in elementary school that still hung on the wall near the phone. You're adopted. You know it, I know it, Mom and Dad know it. The only difference is they want to keep playing house, and I'm tired of pretending. The word adopted shouldn't have hit me like a physical blow. I'd always known I was adopted. The Sullivans had never hidden it from me, never made it a secret or something shameful. They'd told me the story in age-appropriate ways as I grew up, how they'd wanted another child, how they'd chosen me, how lucky they felt to be my parents. It was part of my origin story, woven into my identity like any other biographical detail. But the way Tyler said it now, like an accusation, like a disqualification, made it sound dirty, foreign, wrong. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am, I said quietly, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted it to. Mom and Dad are my parents. This is my family. This is my home. No, Tyler said, and his voice was steel. Mom and Dad took you in because they felt sorry for you. This is my home, my family, my inheritance. The last word came out sharp, like he'd been holding it back, and finally let it loose. And when Grandpa's will gets read next week, you're going to see exactly how much you really belong here. The kitchen felt like it was tilting, like the earth had shifted just slightly off its axis. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles going white against the familiar oak surface that had hosted countless family meals, homework sessions, and heart-to-heart conversations. Tyler, I don't care about Grandpa's money. Right, he scoffed. That's why you've been playing the devoted granddaughter all these months. Making him soup, driving him to doctor appointments, sleeping on that uncomfortable chair in his hospital room. You were working an angle just like you always do. Each word felt like a slap. I thought about all those evenings I'd spent with Grandpa, reading him James Patterson novels when his eyes got too tired, helping him organize his old photographs, listening to his stories about the Sullivan family history. Stories I'd thought were my history too. I did those things because I love him, because he's my grandfather. He was never your grandfather, Tyler said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more violent than shouting. You're just adopted trash, Emma. You don't belong here, and you never will. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the antique clock on the wall, the distant sound of a neighbor mowing their lawn. Normal sounds of a normal afternoon, in a normal house, except nothing felt normal anymore. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. Mom and Dad never made me feel like trash. Mom and Dad are too polite to say what everyone else is thinking. Tyler's expression didn't soften. But I'm done being polite, you want to know the truth. We all got tired of pretending years ago. The whole family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. We're all just waiting for you to figure out that you don't really fit. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. This was Tyler, who'd taught me how to ride a bike, who'd threatened to beat up Danny Morrison when he pulled my hair in 6th grade, who'd driven 3 hours to bring me soup when I had food poisoning during my freshman year of college. This was the brother who'd walked me down the aisle at his best friend's wedding when I was his date, who'd called me crying when his girlfriend broke up with him senior year, who'd helped me move into 4 different apartments. Or maybe that person had never existed at all. Maybe I'd been seeing kindness where there was only obligation, love where there was only duty. I need to go, I said, grabbing my laptop and my purse from the counter. Running away, Tyler asked. That's about right, when things get uncomfortable just disappear. It's what you're good at. I turned to look at him one more time, this stranger wearing my brother's face. I'm not running away, I'm leaving before I say something I can't take back. Like what? The truth. That you've been freeloading off this family your entire life, that you've been taking resources and love and attention that should have gone to actual blood relatives. The words followed me as I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room, with its worn leather furniture and family portraits, past the front hall where my school pictures still hung in chronological order from kindergarten through high school graduation. 26 years of history in this house, and Tyler had just told me none of it belonged to me. I made it to my car before the tears started. Big ugly sobs that shook my shoulders and made it impossible to see clearly enough to drive. I sat in the driveway of the house I'd called home for 18 years, looking up at the second-story window that had been my bedroom, at the oak tree. Tyler and I had climbed as children, at the basketball hoop, over the garage, where we'd played countless games of one-on-one. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Dinner at 6 tonight, making your favorite Nyan's chicken and dumplings. Don't be late." The normalcy of it made me cry harder. Mom's cheerful message, sent from the same phone she'd used to call me every Sunday for the past 8 years since I'd moved out, felt like it belonged to a different reality. One where I was still Emma Sullivan, beloved daughter and sister, integral part of a close-knit family. Not Emma the outsider. Emma the charity case, Emma the adopted trash. I started the car and drove aimlessly through the familiar streets of my hometown. Past the elementary school where Tyler and I had both attended, where Mrs. Chen had praised my book reports, and where I'd been chosen for the safety patrol in 5th grade. Past the park where our family had held countless birthday parties, and where Dad had taught us both how to throw a proper spiral. Past the ice cream shop where Grandpa had taken Tyler and me every Friday after school when we were kids, always letting us order whatever we wanted and never telling Mom and Dad about the extra scoops. Everything looked the same, but it all felt foreign now, like I was seeing it through different eyes. Had the other families at the school events whispered about the Sullivans' adopted daughter? Had the neighbors always seen me as temporary, a foster child who'd overstayed her welcome? Had I been the only one who believed I truly belonged? I found myself driving toward the cemetery, where Grandpa would be buried next week. It was a peaceful place, old and well-maintained, with towering maple trees and weathered headstones that spoke of generations of families laid to rest together. The Sullivan family plot was in the older section, where Grandpa's parents and grandparents were buried, where a space had been reserved for him next to Grandma Ruth, who'd passed when I was 12. I parked and walked to Grandma Ruth's grave, kneeling down in the soft grass beside her headstone. Someone, probably Mom, had left fresh flowers there recently. Yellow roses, which had been Grandma's favorite. "I don't know what to do, Grandma," I whispered to the stone, feeling foolish but needing to say the words out loud. "Tyler says I don't belong. He says the whole family thinks I'm just pretending to be one of you." The wind rustled through the maple leaves above me, and for a moment I could almost hear Grandma Ruth's voice, the way she used to sound when she'd comfort me after nightmares or scraped knees. She'd been the one to tell me stories about my adoption, about how she and Grandpa had prayed for another grandchild, and how happy they'd been when Mom and Dad brought me home. "You were our miracle girl," she used to say, stroking my hair while we sat on her porch swing. "We'd been hoping for you for such a long time." But maybe those had just been pretty stories told to make a displaced child feel better about her circumstances. Maybe Tyler was right, and the adults in my life had been too kind to tell me the truth about how they really felt. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Mom's name appeared on the screen, along with her contact photo. A picture of us from last Mother's Day, both of us laughing at something Dad had said while we prepared brunch together. I almost didn't answer. What would I say? How do you ask your mother if she really loves you, or if she's just been going through the motions out of some misguided sense of duty? How do you inquire whether your entire family has been lying to your face for 18 years? "Hi Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma honey, where are you? I got home and saw your car was gone. Tyler said you'd left upset about something." Tyler. Of course he'd already spun the story to make himself look better. "I'm at the cemetery. Visiting Grandma Ruth." Mom's voice softened the way it always did when we talked about Grandma. "Oh sweetheart, are you okay? I know Grandpa's passing has been hard on all of us. Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course honey, anything." I took a deep breath, trying to find words for a question I'd never imagined needing to ask. "Do you ever regret adopting me?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When Mom finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Emma Catherine Sullivan, what on earth would make you ask something like that?" The use of my full name, the same tone she'd used when I was little and had done something that worried her, made fresh tears spring to my eyes. "Tyler said some things today. About how I don't really belong in this family. About how everyone's been pretending. That boy," Mom said, and I could hear the anger building in her voice. "What exactly did he say to you?" I couldn't bring myself to repeat Tyler's exact words. The phrase adopted trash felt too ugly to say out loud to the woman who'd tucked me in every night for 10 years and taught me how to braid friendship bracelets and celebrated every small victory in my life like it was a major triumph. He said I was just taking up space that should have gone to blood relatives. He said the whole family is tired of pretending I belong here. Mom was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but fierce. Emma, I want you to come home right now. We need to talk about this face to face. Mom, I don't think I can handle another confrontation today. Not with Tyler, she said quickly. He won't be here. I sent him to his apartment to cool off, but we need to talk, just you and me. There are things you need to know, things I should have told you a long time ago. Something in her tone sent a chill through me. What kind of things? Things about your adoption, things about Grandpa, things Tyler doesn't know, and that might change how you understand everything that's happened today. I looked around the cemetery, at all the headstones marking families who'd been laid to rest together, generations connected by blood and love and shared history. Are you saying there's more to the story? I'm saying that family isn't always what it seems on the surface. And I'm saying that Tyler has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to your place in this family, or what Grandpa thought about you.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
My heart was beating fast now, the way it did when I sensed something important was about to shift. Mom, you're scaring me a little. I don't mean to, honey, but I think it's time you learned the whole truth about who you are and where you come from. Can you come home, please? I stood up, brushing grass from my knees and taking one last look at Grandma Ruth's headstone. The yellow roses moved gently in the afternoon breeze, and I had the strangest feeling that she was trying to tell me something, urging me towards some truth I'd been walking past my entire life. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told Mom. Good. And Emma, whatever Tyler said to you today, whatever he made you feel, that's not the truth. The truth is so much more complicated and so much more beautiful than either of you could possibly imagine. I drove home through streets that felt different now, charged with possibility and dread in equal measure. The house looked the same as I pulled into the driveway, white colonial with blue shutters. The front garden Mom maintained with religious devotion. The porch swing where Grandpa used to sit reading his newspaper every morning. But I knew I was about to learn something that would change how I saw all of it. Mom was waiting for me on the front steps, still wearing the floral dress she'd worn to work that morning, her dark hair pulled back in the same simple style she'd favored for as long as I could remember. But her face looked different somehow, older and more serious than I'd ever seen it. She hugged me tight when I reached the porch, the kind of fierce hug she used to give me when I was little and had woken up from bad dreams. I'm so sorry, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry Tyler hurt you like that. And I'm sorry I didn't prepare you better for this day. What day? I asked, pulling back to look at her face. The day when you'd learn who you really are, she said, taking my hand and leading me into the house. And why Grandpa's will is going to shock everyone next week, especially Tyler. We sat down in the living room, in the same chairs where we'd had countless conversations over the years. Mom folded her hands in her lap, the way she always did when she was choosing her words carefully. Emma, what do you remember about your life before you came to us? I shrugged. Not much. I was 7. I remember being in a couple different foster homes, but they're mostly just impressions, feelings more than actual memories. Why? Do you remember anything about your birth family? Your biological parents? The question made me uncomfortable the way it always had. It felt like looking at something I wasn't supposed to see, poking at a wound that had healed over but never quite stopped being tender. No, you and Dad always said the records were sealed, that there wasn't much information available. Mom nodded slowly. We told you that because we thought it was kinder than the truth, and because we'd promised someone that we would never tell you unless absolutely necessary. My stomach clenched. Promised who? Your grandfather, Mom said quietly. Grandpa Joe. The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at Mom trying to process what she was telling me. What does Grandpa have to do with my adoption? Mom reached over and took my hands in hers. the same way she used to when she was about to tell me something that might hurt but that I needed to hear. "Emma, honey, you weren't adopted by strangers. You were never in the foster care system because you were orphaned or abandoned. You were in foster care because your biological father couldn't take care of you, and he asked us to." "I don't understand. Your biological father is Grandpa Joe's son," Mom said, her voice gentle but clear. "He's your father's brother. Your Uncle Michael." The room seemed to tilt around me. Uncle Michael, Dad's younger brother who lived in California, who sent Christmas cards but rarely visited, who had struggled with addiction and mental health issues for most of his adult life. Uncle Michael, who Dad spoke about with a mixture of love and worry, who'd never married and never had children as far as I knew. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Uncle Michael doesn't have any kids." "He has one," Mom said. "You." The implications hit me like a physical force. If Uncle Michael was my biological father, then Robert Sullivan wasn't just my adoptive father. He was my actual uncle. Janet Sullivan wasn't just my adoptive mother. She was my aunt by marriage. Tyler wasn't just my adoptive brother. He was my biological cousin. And Grandpa Joe, the man who'd loved me and spoiled me and told me stories about Ireland, who'd taught me to fish and slipped me candy when Mom wasn't looking, wasn't just my adoptive grandfather. He was my biological grandfather. His blood ran in my veins. His genes shaped my face and my hands. And the way I laughed. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Because Michael made us promise. He was in such a dark place when you were little, struggling with addiction and in and out of treatment centers. He knew he couldn't be the father you deserved, but he also couldn't bear the thought of you growing up thinking he'd abandoned you. So he asked us to raise you as our own, to give you stability and love and a normal childhood." "But I am your own," I said, confused. "You're my family." "Yes," Mom said firmly. "We are your family, and we always will be, but you're also Grandpa's biological granddaughter, his blood granddaughter. You belong to this family in ways Tyler couldn't even imagine." I thought about Tyler's words in the kitchen, about how I was just adopted trash, about how I didn't belong. All this time I'd been more connected to the Sullivan bloodline than he'd ever suspected. I was Grandpa's granddaughter twice over-membered, by adoption and by birth. "Does Tyler know any of this?" Mom shook her head. "No one knows except your dad and me. And now you." Michael wanted it kept secret until you were old enough to understand the complexity of the situation. He was going to tell you himself when he got his life together, but she trailed off, her expression sad. "But he never did get his life together. He's trying," Mom said. "He's been clean for 3 years now, working as a counselor at a treatment center in Sacramento. He wanted to reach out to you, but he wasn't sure you'd want to know him." My mind was reeling, trying to reorganize everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my place in the world. "What about Grandpa? Did he know?" Mom smiled through her tears. "Oh honey, Grandpa has known from the beginning. He's the one who suggested we adopt you. He said he couldn't bear the thought of his granddaughter growing up with strangers when she had family who could love her." The memory of Grandpa calling me his miracle girl took on new meaning. I hadn't been a miracle because they'd prayed for another grandchild and gotten lucky. I'd been a miracle because I was his actual granddaughter, returned to the family when she needed them most. "There's something else," Mom said, reaching into the end table drawer and pulling out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. "He left this for you. Asked me to give it to you after his funeral. But given what happened today, I think you need to read it now." My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. It was thick, like it contained more than just a letter. I carefully opened it and found 3 pieces of paper inside: a handwritten letter, a copy of a DNA test, and what looked like a legal document. The letter was dated 6 months ago, right around the time Grandpa had been diagnosed with cancer. "My dearest Emma," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and it's time for you to know the truth about who you are and where you come from." I looked up at Mom, who was watching me with anxious eyes. "Did you know what was in here?" She shook her head. "He sealed it himself. I promised him I'd give it to you unopened." I continued reading, Grandpa's voice clear in my mind as I absorbed his words. I've watched you grow up these past 18 years, and I've seen you struggle sometimes with questions about your identity, about whether you truly belong in this family. I should have told you the truth sooner, but I wanted to respect your father Michael's wishes, and I wanted to protect you from adult complications that weren't your fault or your responsibility. The letter went on to explain everything Mom had just told me, but from Grandpa's perspective, how he'd fought to keep me in the family, when Michael couldn't care for me, how he'd insisted that Robert and Janet adopt me rather than letting me go to strangers, how he'd watched me grow up knowing I was his granddaughter twice over and feeling proud every single day. You have the Sullivan stubborn streak, he'd written, and your grandmother Ruth's kind heart. You have your father Michael's artistic soul, and your Uncle Robert's sense of responsibility. You are made up of all of us, Emma, and we are all better for having you in our lives. The DNA test was a match between Grandpa and me, showing a clear grandfather-granddaughter biological relationship. He must have had it done recently, maybe when he started feeling sick and wanted to have official documentation, but it was the legal document that made me gasp out loud. It was a copy of his will, dated just 2 weeks ago. Grandpa had left everything to me: the house, the land, the family business, his savings, all of it was mine. At the bottom of the page, in his careful handwriting, he'd added a note: to my granddaughter Emma Sullivan, who has brought more joy and love to this family than she could ever know. This is your inheritance, by blood and by choice. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong here. Mom, I said, my voice barely working. Did you know about this? She leaned over to look at the will copy, and her eyes went wide. No, we knew he was updating his will, but he didn't tell us the details. Oh my God, Emma. He left you everything. I thought about Tyler in the kitchen, talking about inheritance, about how I'd see exactly how much I really belonged when Grandpa's will was read. He'd been so confident that he'd inherit everything, so sure that blood would tell, and I'd be left with nothing but the charity scraps. He had no idea that I was the blood granddaughter, the one Grandpa had chosen to carry on the Sullivan legacy. Tyler is going to lose his mind, I said, and despite everything, I almost wanted to laugh at the irony. Tyler is going to learn a very important lesson about making assumptions, Mom said firmly, and about treating family members with cruelty. I folded the letter carefully and put everything back in the envelope. My hands had stopped shaking, and for the first time since leaving the cemetery, I felt steady, grounded, like I knew who I was again. I want to call Uncle Michael, I said, my father. I want to talk to him. Mom smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her all day. I think he'd like that very much. I have his number. As she went to get her phone, I sat in the living room, looking around at the family photos, the familiar furniture, the comfortable chaos of a home that had been lived in and loved in for decades. It all looked the same, but it felt different now. Not because I belonged here less, but because I belonged here more than I'd ever imagined. I was Emma Sullivan, adopted daughter and biological granddaughter. I was Michael Sullivan's child, and Robert and Janet Sullivan's daughter. I was Tyler's cousin who'd been raised as his sister. I was Grandpa Joe's miracle girl, chosen and beloved and worthy of inheriting everything he'd worked his whole life to build. And tomorrow, when Grandpa's will was read, and Tyler learned the truth, he was going to discover that the adopted trash he'd tried to throw away was actually the heir to everything he'd assumed would be his. The thought should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt like relief. Relief that I did belong, that I always had, that the love I'd felt from this family, for 18 years, had been real and deep and complicated in ways that made it stronger, not weaker. I was home. I had always been home, and now I had the documents to prove it. The morning of Grandpa's funeral arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matches grief perfectly. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the black dress Mom had helped me pick out 3 days ago, before everything changed. Before I learned that the reflection staring back at me belonged to someone entirely different than I'd believed for 26 years. My phone had been buzzing all morning with messages from family members. Aunt Linda asking if I needed a ride to the church. Cousin Sarah wondering if I'd finished the photo slideshow. Uncle Tom checking on funeral logistics. Normal family communications that felt surreal now that I knew the secret they were all unknowingly keeping. Tyler hadn't contacted me since our confrontation in the kitchen. According to Mom, he'd been staying at his apartment, telling people he was too overwhelmed with grief to deal with family drama. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was avoiding the very family he'd claimed I didn't belong to, while I was the one fielding calls and coordinating with relatives. Last night, I'd finally called Uncle Michael in Sacramento. My father. The words still felt strange in my mind, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit yet. His voice had been cautious when he answered, the way people sound when they're expecting bad news. "Emma," he'd said, and I could hear the surprise mixed with something that might have been hope. "Janet said you might call. We'd talked for 2 hours. He told me about his struggles with addiction, about the guilt he'd carried for 26 years, about watching me grow up through Facebook photos and family newsletters, proud but afraid to interfere with the life Robert and Janet had built for me. I told him about Tyler's words, about learning the truth, about reading Grandpa's letter. Your grandfather never gave up on me," Michael had said, his voice thick with emotion, "even when I gave up on myself. He used to send me pictures of you, updates about school and achievements. He'd always end his letters the same way. Your daughter is thriving. When you're ready, she'll be here, now getting ready for Grandpa's funeral." I felt the weight of carrying so many secrets. The family gathering downstairs had no idea that everything they thought they knew about our family structure was about to explode. More importantly, they had no idea that Grandpa's will would redefine everything. I could hear voices in the kitchen as I came downstairs. Tyler had apparently decided to show up after all, his deep voice mixing with Dad's, as they discussed pallbearer duties. The sound made my stomach tighten. I wasn't ready to face him, not with everything I now knew swimming in my head. Tyler was standing by the coffee maker, looking haggard in his black suit.
His hair was disheveled and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked up when I entered the kitchen, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe. Or just awkwardness at being in the same room after what he'd said to me. "Emma," he said quietly, "I wasn't sure you'd be here." The statement was so absurd it almost made me laugh. "It's Grandpa's funeral, Tyler. Of course I'm here." "Right." He poured coffee into a travel mug, his movements careful and controlled. "Look, about the other day. I was upset about Grandpa, and I said some things I probably shouldn't have. Not I was wrong or I'm sorry for hurting you, just that he probably shouldn't have said them." I studied his face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse, but all I saw was the uncomfortable shuffle of someone who wanted to smooth things over without actually taking responsibility. "You told me I was adopted trash," I said quietly, making sure my voice carried to where Mom and Dad were reviewing funeral programs at the kitchen table. "You said the whole family was tired of pretending I belonged here." Tyler's jaw tightened. I was emotional. People say things when they're grieving. "No," I said, stepping closer to him. "Grieving people say they're sad or angry or lost. They don't systematically tear down their sister's sense of identity and belonging. What you said came from somewhere else." Mom looked up from her programs, her expression sharp. "What exactly did you say to Emma?" "Tyler." Tyler shot me a look that was part anger, part panic. He clearly hadn't expected this conversation to happen in front of our parents. It was a private disagreement between siblings. "Calling your sister trash isn't a disagreement," Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's cruelty." "She's not my sister," Tyler snapped, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "She's not anybody's sister. She's a foster kid you took in, and everyone pretends otherwise, but that doesn't make it true." The silence that followed was absolute. Mom's face went white, then red. Dad stood up from his chair, his tall frame seeming to fill the kitchen. Even Tyler seemed to realize he'd crossed a line, his face flushing as the weight of what he'd said settled over the room. "Tyler James Sullivan," Mom said, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you speak about your sister that way? How dare you speak about our daughter that way?" "She's not our daughter," Tyler said, doubling down even as his voice got smaller. "Not really, and with Grandpa gone we don't have to keep pretending anymore. The truth is going to come out anyway when his will gets read this afternoon." I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it. This was the moment when Tyler's assumptions would collide with reality in the most spectacular way possible. I could tell him the truth right now, could watch his face as he learned that I was more connected to this family's bloodline than he'd ever imagined. But something held me back. Maybe I wanted him to learn it the hard way. Maybe I wanted the shock of it to hit him in front of the entire extended family at the lawyer's office. "You seem very confident about what Grandpa's will says," I said instead. Tyler's expression grew smug. "I spent more time with him than anyone these past few months. We talked about legacy, about keeping the family business and property in the family, blood family, and you think that excludes me. I think that includes the people who are actually related to him." Tyler's voice was gaining strength now, like he thought he was winning an argument. "I think it includes the grandson who carries his name and his genes, not the charity case he felt sorry for." Dad stepped forward, his face dark with anger, but I held up a hand to stop him. "It's okay, Dad." Tyler's made his position very clear. "I guess we'll all find out this afternoon exactly what Grandpa thought about family and blood, and who deserves what." "Emma, honey," Mom started, but I shook my head. "No, it's fine. Tyler's entitled to his opinions. And in a few hours, we'll all know whether Grandpa shared them." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. "I'll meet you all at the church." The funeral was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. The church was packed with people whose lives Grandpa had touched over his 83 years. Neighbors, business associates, employees from the construction company he'd built from nothing, friends from his weekly poker game, members of the volunteer fire department where he'd served for 40 years. I sat in the front pew between Mom and Dad, with Tyler on Mom's other side. Throughout the service, I could feel Tyler's eyes on me occasionally, like he was trying to read my expression or figure out why I seemed so calm about what he'd said in the kitchen. The pastor spoke about Grandpa's legacy, about a man who'd built not just a successful business but a loving family, who'd believed in second chances, and the power of choosing love over blood when necessary. Several people got up to speak, sharing stories about Grandpa's generosity, his sense of humor, his fierce loyalty to the people he cared about. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium carrying the letter Grandpa had written me, though the congregation didn't know what it was. I looked out at the sea of faces, some I'd known my whole life, others I was meeting for the first time. "My grandfather taught me that family isn't just about who you're born to," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "He taught me that family is about who shows up for you, who chooses to love you even when it's complicated, who sees the best in you even when you can't see it yourself." I told stories about fishing trips and Sunday dinners, about Grandpa teaching me to change a tire and helping me with my college applications. I talked about his wisdom and his terrible jokes, about the way he made everyone feel like they were his favorite person in the world. "He used to call me his miracle girl," I said, looking directly at Tyler. I never fully understood what he meant by that until recently. But I think he meant that the best things in life often come to us in ways we don't expect, through paths we wouldn't have chosen, bringing gifts we didn't know we needed. When I finished speaking, the applause was warm and sustained. I could see tears in many eyes, including Mom's and Dad's. Tyler was staring at his hands, his face unreadable. After the burial service at the cemetery, the family gathered at our house for a meal that had been organized by Aunt Linda and the church ladies. The house was full of people sharing memories and comfort food, the kind of gathering Grandpa would have loved. I moved through the rooms, accepting condolences and hugs, feeling both deeply connected to this community and strangely detached from it, like I was watching it all from outside myself. Around 3 o'clock, Uncle Tom approached me in the kitchen where I was helping clean up casserole dishes. "Emma, the lawyer wants to meet with the immediate family in about an hour to read Grandpa's will. Can you be ready to go?" I nodded, feeling my stomach tighten with nervousness. "Who counts as immediate family?" "Just the core group. Your parents, Tyler, you and your Aunt Linda, since she's been helping manage some of Grandpa's affairs lately." Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, having clearly overheard. "Are you sure Emma needs to be there?" "I mean for the will reading." Uncle Tom looked confused. "Of course she needs to be there. She's Joe's granddaughter." "Right," but Tyler glanced at me, then back at Uncle Tom. I just thought maybe it would be easier for everyone if expectations were managed appropriately. The patronizing tone in his voice made my teeth clench. He was still so certain that I'd be humiliated, still so convinced that Grandpa's will would prove his point about blood and belonging. I think I can handle whatever expectations need to be managed, I said evenly. An hour later, we were sitting in the law offices of Henderson and Associates, the firm that had handled Grandpa's legal affairs for decades. Mr. Henderson was an elderly man with kind eyes who'd known our family for years. He offered his condolences and made small talk about the funeral before settling behind his desk with a thick folder. Joe was very specific about how he wanted this handled, Mr. Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. He updated his will several times over the past year, and the final version was signed just 2 weeks before his passing. Tyler leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I could practically feel his anticipation radiating across the room. He was so sure this was his moment of vindication. Before I begin reading the specific bequests, Mr. Henderson continued. Joe wanted me to share a letter he wrote to the family. He said it would help explain some of his decisions. He pulled out a sealed envelope and carefully opened it, unfolding what looked like several pages of Grandpa's handwriting. My dear family, Mr. Henderson read aloud. If you're hearing this, then I'm gone and it's time for some truths to be spoken that I've kept quiet for too long. I felt my pulse quicken. This was it. This was when everything would come out. First, I want you all to know how proud I am of the family we've built together. Not just the family we were born into, but the family we've chosen to create and maintain through love, loyalty, and commitment to one another. Mr. Henderson paused, looking around the room at our faces. Tyler was still leaning forward eagerly. Mom and Dad were holding hands. Aunt Linda was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Some of you may be surprised by the decisions I've made in this will. Some of you may feel that I've been unfair, or that I've valued some family members over others. But I want you to understand that every choice I've made has been based on a lifetime of watching how people treat each other, how they show love, and how they define family. The lawyer continued reading, and Grandpa's voice seemed to fill the room. There are secrets in this family that I've helped keep, promises I've honored even when it would have been easier to break them. But there's one secret that needs to come to light today, because it affects how you'll understand my final wishes. Tyler shifted in his chair, frowning slightly. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. 26 years ago, my son Michael found himself unable to care for his daughter. Rather than let her disappear into the foster system among strangers, our family made the choice to keep her close. Robert and Janet adopted Emma not just because they wanted another child, but because we all believed she belonged with us, where her bloodline originated. The words hit the room like a physical force. Aunt Linda gasped. Tyler went completely still, his face draining of color. Mom squeezed Dad's hand tighter, tears starting to fall. Emma Sullivan is not just my adoptive granddaughter, Mr. Henderson continued reading. She is my biological granddaughter, Michael's daughter, and she has been a blessing to this family since the day she came home to us. I watched Tyler's face as the reality crashed over him. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes darted between me and the lawyer, like he was trying to process information that didn't fit with everything he'd believed. I have watched Emma grow up knowing she belonged to us in every possible way, the letter continued. I have watched her love this family fiercely, contribute to our lives immeasurably, and prove every single day that blood and choice together create the strongest bonds of all. Tyler's hands were gripping the arms of his chair now, his knuckles white. That's not possible, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Henderson looked up from the letter. I'm sorry, Emma can't be Uncle Michael's daughter. Uncle Michael doesn't have kids. He's never been married, never even had a serious girlfriend that I know of. Michael struggled with addiction and mental health issues for many years, Mr. Henderson said gently. According to Joe's letter, he felt unable to provide a stable home for his daughter, so he asked his brother Robert to raise her. No, Tyler stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. No, that's not right. Emma was adopted from the foster system. She's not actually related to us. Tyler, Mom said softly. Sit down, honey. You knew. Tyler whirled around to stare at her. You knew she was actually Dad's niece this whole time. Your father and I are the only ones who knew, Mom said. Michael asked us to keep it private until Emma was old enough to understand, and then he wanted to tell her himself when he was ready. But she's not. Tyler looked at me, his face a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like betrayal. You're not actually adopted. You're our cousin. I'm both, I said quietly. I'm your cousin who was raised as your sister. I'm Grandpa's granddaughter by blood and by choice. Tyler sank back into his chair, staring at me like he was seeing a stranger. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because it wasn't anyone's secret to tell except Michael's and Emma's, Dad said, and because it didn't change anything about how we felt about her or her place in this family. It changes everything, Tyler said, his voice hollow. Everything I said to you. Everything I thought. He trailed off, the full weight of his cruelty hitting him, as he realized he'd been attacking someone who had more biological claim to the Sullivan legacy than he'd ever imagined. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat gently. Should I continue with the will? I nodded, even though my heart was pounding. Tyler looked like he was in shock, staring at the floor with an expression I'd never seen before. The lawyer resumed reading Grandpa's letter. I know some of you expected me to divide my estate equally among my descendants, or to leave everything to Tyler as the male heir, or to follow some other traditional pattern. But I've chosen to leave my estate to the person who has shown the most love, dedication, and commitment to this family over the years. Tyler's head snapped up, hope flickering across his features.
I am leaving my house, my land, my business, and the majority of my savings to my granddaughter Emma Sullivan, with the hope that she will use these gifts to build a life that honors the values our family holds dear. The silence in the room was deafening. Tyler went completely pale, gripping his chair like he might fall over. Aunt Linda made a small sound of surprise. Mom started crying quietly. To my grandson Tyler, the lawyer continued, I leave my collection of tools, my truck, and $50,000, with the hope that these gifts will help him build something meaningful with his hands and his heart. Tyler's voice cracked when he spoke. I don't understand. I'm his grandson too. I carry the Sullivan name. Names don't make families, I said softly, remembering Grandpa's exact words from his personal letter to me. Love makes families. Mr. Henderson looked up from the documents. There's more to the letter if you'd like me to continue. We all nodded, though Tyler looked like he was barely holding himself together. I want to be clear that this decision has nothing to do with favoring one grandchild over another. Both Emma and Tyler are precious to me, and I love them both deeply. But Emma has spent the last several years showing up for this family in ways that matter. She's the one who drove me to doctor appointments when my eyes got too bad to drive safely. She's the one who spent nights in the hospital chair when I was sick. She's the one who organized family gatherings and remembered birthdays and made sure everyone felt included and loved. Tyler flinched at each item on the list, probably remembering all the times he'd been too busy or too focused on his own life to help with Grandpa's care. More than that, Emma has proven over and over again that she understands what it means to be a Sullivan. She leads with kindness, she fights for fairness, she includes rather than excludes, and she defines family by love and commitment rather than by convenience or assumption. The lawyer paused, looking around the room again. Joe wanted me to add that he hoped this wouldn't cause division in the family, but that he felt it was important to reward the values he wanted to see carried forward. Tyler stood up abruptly. I need some air, he said, his voice tight. This is a lot to process. He walked out of the office, leaving the rest of us sitting in stunned silence. I felt sorry for him, despite everything he'd said to me. Having your entire worldview shattered in the space of an hour had to be devastating. Mr. Henderson spent the next 30 minutes going through the technical details of the inheritance, explaining the paperwork I'd need to sign, and the timeline for transferring ownership of various assets. The house where I'd grown up, the 20 acres of land it sat on, Grandpa's construction business that had been the foundation of our family's financial security for 3 generations. All of it was now mine. When we finally left the lawyer's office, Tyler was sitting in his car in the parking lot, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Mom went over to talk to him while Dad and Aunt Linda waited by our car. Emma, Aunt Linda said, taking my hands in hers. I just want you to know that this doesn't surprise me at all. Joe always had a special relationship with you, and you've been such a gift to our family. Thank you, I said, though I was still processing everything that had happened. I'm sorry Tyler's upset. Tyler will figure out how to deal with this, Dad said firmly. What he said to you the other day was inexcusable, and now he knows just how wrong he was. Mom returned from Tyler's car, shaking her head. He says he needs time to think. He's going to drive around for a while before he comes home. As we drove back to the house, I stared out the window at the familiar landscape of my hometown. Everything looked the same, but I felt fundamentally changed. Not just because of the inheritance, but because of what had been revealed about my identity, my place in the family, and the depth of Grandpa's love for me. Are you okay? Mom asked, reaching back to squeeze my hand from the front seat. I think so, I said. It's just a lot to take in. The inheritance, everything, learning about Uncle Michael, finding out Tyler's been harboring all this resentment, realizing that Grandpa knew exactly what was happening in this family and chose to handle it this way. He was a wise man, Dad said. Sometimes wisdom looks like patience, and sometimes it looks like decisive action. When we got home, I walked through the house that was now legally mine, seeing it with new eyes. The kitchen where Tyler had called me adopted trash was now my kitchen. The living room where we'd gathered for countless holidays was now my living room. The business that had supported our family for generations was now my responsibility. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead it felt like everything was finally in its proper place. Like Grandpa had seen something I couldn't see, and had arranged things exactly as they should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Michael in California. Janet told me what happened today. I'm proud of you and I think Dad would be proud too. Call me when you're ready to talk more about everything. I was sitting on the porch swing, still holding my phone, when Tyler's car finally pulled into the driveway. He sat there for a long moment before getting out and walking slowly toward the house. His face looked older somehow, like the afternoon had aged him in ways that went beyond hours. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at me. Can we talk? I nodded, gesturing to the other end of the swing. He climbed the steps and sat down, leaving space between us. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. A massive, comprehensive, life-changing apology. Yes, I said, you do. He was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. I've been angry for a long time, jealous I guess. You always seem to be everyone's favorite, especially Grandpa's. You were the one he called for advice, the one he wanted to spend time with. I told myself it was because you were trying harder, working some kind of angle. And now I realize you weren't trying harder, you were just loving harder. And I was too selfish and entitled to see the difference. Tyler's voice cracked slightly. When I found out about the inheritance today, my first thought wasn't about the money or the property. It was about how completely wrong I'd been about everything. About you, about family, about what actually matters. I studied his profile, looking for signs of sincerity versus self-pity. What you said to me in the kitchen was unforgivable, Tyler. You didn't just insult me, you tried to destroy my sense of belonging in the only family I've ever known. I know. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were red-rimmed. I can't take it back, and I can't undo the damage. But I need you to know that I was wrong about everything. You belong here more than anyone, including me. Grandpa saw that, and he was right to choose you. We sat in silence for a while, the porch swing creaking gently in the evening breeze. I thought about all the conversations Tyler and I had shared on this swing over the years, all the confidences and jokes and sibling moments that had shaped our relationship. It felt like those memories belonged to different people now. I don't forgive you, I said finally. Not yet. What you said hurt too much, and it came from a place that was too ugly. But I'm not writing you off completely either. Tyler nodded, accepting the boundary I was setting. That's more than I deserve. It's what family does, I said. We hold space for people to grow and change, even when they've hurt us. But you have to actually do the growing and changing. Words aren't enough. I will, he said. I promise I will. As the sun set behind the trees that now belonged to me, I felt the strange weight of everything that had shifted in my life over the past week. I was no longer just Emma the adopted daughter. I was Emma the biological granddaughter, Emma the inheritor,
Emma the keeper of family legacy and secrets. But more than that, I was Emma who had been loved deeply by a man who saw exactly who she was, and chose to build his final act of love around honoring that truth. And that, more than any inheritance or revelation, felt like the real gift Grandpa had left me. 3 months had passed since the funeral, and the house still felt too big for just me. I'd kept most of Grandpa's furniture where it was, changing only what felt necessary to make the space truly mine. His favorite armchair remained by the window where he used to read the morning paper. The kitchen table where we'd shared countless conversations stayed exactly where it had always been. Some changes happen slowly, and some happen all at once. Tyler had been true to his word about growing and changing, though our relationship remained carefully polite, rather than warmly familial. He'd started therapy, something he mentioned awkwardly during one of our monthly coffee meetings that Mom had suggested we try. He was working on understanding where his resentment had come from, why he'd felt so threatened by my presence in the family. Progress, but not forgiveness. Not yet. The construction business had been the biggest adjustment. I'd kept the core team of employees who'd worked with Grandpa for decades, men who knew more about building than I'd probably ever learn. But I'd also brought in fresh ideas, updated technology, and a focus on sustainable building practices that had attracted new clients. The business was thriving in ways that surprised everyone, including me. Uncle Michael had visited twice since the funeral. The first time had been awkward, 2 strangers trying to figure out how to be father and daughter after 26 years of separation. But the second visit had felt more natural. We'd spent hours going through old photo albums that Mom had saved, and he'd told me stories about my early childhood that I'd never heard. Stories about how I used to sing myself to sleep, and how I'd insisted on wearing my favorite purple dress every single day until it fell apart. "You were so fierce, even as a little girl," he'd said, pointing to a picture of 3-year-old me with chocolate cake smeared across my face and a defiant expression. "When you wanted something, you never gave up. I used to worry that I'd passed too much of my stubborn streak on to you." "Maybe stubbornness isn't always a bad thing," I'd replied, thinking about how that same trait had helped me survive Tyler's cruelty and emerge stronger on the other side. Michael had been sober for 3 years now, and was working as a counselor at a residential treatment facility. He'd shown me pictures of the clients he worked with, people struggling with the same demons that had nearly destroyed his life. "I tell them about you sometimes," he'd admitted. "About how making the hardest decision of my life, giving you up, ended up being the best thing I ever did for both of us." It was a Tuesday morning in late October, when everything came full circle in a way I never could have anticipated. I was in the office above Grandpa's old construction shop, reviewing blueprints for a new housing development, when my assistant Sarah knocked on the door. "Emma, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal, not business." I looked up from the plans spread across my desk. "Did they give you a name?" Sarah shook her head, just said she was family, and that it was important. I walked downstairs to the main office, and found a woman about my age standing by the reception desk, studying the framed photos of completed projects that lined the walls. She had dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and was wearing a professional-looking navy suit. There was something familiar about her profile that I couldn't quite place. "Can I help you?" I asked. She turned around, and I felt my breath catch. The face looking back at me was like looking into a slightly distorted mirror. Same dark eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of tilting her head when curious. But where my hair was wavy, hers was straight. Where my nose had a slight bump from breaking it in high school soccer, hers was perfectly straight. "You must be Emma," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't identify. "I'm Claire Sullivan Martinez." The surname hit me like a physical blow. "Sullivan," she nodded, her expression nervous but determined. "I think we might be sisters." I stared at her, my mind racing through possibilities. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. I only have one brother, Tyler, and you're definitely not him." Claire laughed, a sound that was startlingly similar to my own laugh. "Not Tyler's sister, Michael's daughter, our father's daughter." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the reception desk, trying to process what she was telling me. "Michael has another daughter. Has. It's complicated." Claire looked around the office, taking in the business that Michael's father had built, that Michael's brother had maintained, that Michael's daughter now owned. Could we maybe talk somewhere more private? This is a lot to explain. I led her upstairs to my office, my mind spinning with questions and implications. If Claire was telling the truth, if she really was Michael's daughter, then everything I thought I knew about my story was incomplete. Again, we sat across from each other at the small conference table I'd inherited along with everything else. Claire folded her hands in her lap, a gesture that reminded me painfully of Mom when she was preparing to share difficult news. I grew up in New Mexico with my mother, Carmen Martinez. Claire began. She met Michael when they were both in their early 20s. He was trying to get clean, she was working as a nurse at the facility where he was getting treatment. They had a brief relationship, and I was the result. I felt like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. When were you born? March 15, 1997. I'm actually 6 months older than you. The math hit me immediately. If Claire was born in March 1997, and I was born in September 1997, that meant Michael had fathered 2 children within months of each other. 2 daughters he'd been unable to care for. My mother raised me as a single parent, Claire continued. Michael knew about me, but he was in such a bad place with his addiction that he couldn't be involved. Carmen never asked him for support, never pursued him legally. She just wanted to protect me from the chaos of his life. But you knew about him, Claire nodded. Mom told me who my father was when I was old enough to understand.
She never spoke badly about him, just explained that he was sick and couldn't take care of a family. She said maybe someday, when he got better, we could have a relationship. I thought about my own childhood, about the carefully constructed story of my adoption, about how the adults in my life had protected me from the complicated truth until I was ready to handle it. Different approach, same loving intention. How did you find out about me? I asked. Michael's been sober for a few years now, and about 6 months ago, he reached out to my mother. He wanted to try to build a relationship with me, to make amends for being absent from my life. During one of our phone calls, he mentioned that he had another daughter, one who'd been adopted by his brother's family. The timeline was starting to make sense. Michael had reached out to Claire around the same time Grandpa was getting sick, around the time he was updating his will and writing letters about family secrets. He told me your name and that you lived in Oregon. I've been trying to work up the courage to contact you for months. Then last week I saw the obituary for Joseph Sullivan online and realized he was your grandfather. Our grandfather, the word "our" hit me unexpectedly hard. I'd spent my entire life as an only child, then discovered I had Tyler as a cousin brother, and now there was Claire, an actual biological sister I'd never known existed. I'm sorry I didn't come to the funeral, Claire continued. I wasn't sure if I had the right, and I didn't want to intrude on your family's grief. He was your grandfather too, I said quietly. You had every right. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I never got to meet him. I never got to know any of this side of my family. When I saw that you inherited his business and property, I realized that maybe it was time to stop being a coward and reach out. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motive, but all I saw was genuine emotion and a nervousness that matched my own. What do you want from me, Claire? Nothing, she said quickly. I don't want money or property or anything like that. I have a good life in Albuquerque. I'm a social worker, I have a house, a fiancé. I'm not here to stake a claim on your inheritance. Then why are you here? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I want to know where I come from. I want to understand the other half of my genetics and my family history. And I guess I was hoping that maybe you'd want to know me too. The vulnerability in her voice reminded me of myself sitting in that lawyer's office, desperate to understand my place in the family structure. Except Claire had grown up knowing she was on the outside, looking in, while I'd grown up believing I was on the inside. Does Michael know you're here? Claire shook her head. I wanted to meet you first, see if you were open to having a relationship, before I told him I'd reached out. He feels guilty enough about both of us, without knowing that his daughters are trying to figure out how to be sisters without him. Sisters. The word felt foreign and familiar at the same time. I'd grown up calling Tyler my brother, but it had always been a chosen relationship, family by adoption and decision. This was different.
This was blood and genes, and shared biology in ways I'd never experienced before. I have so many questions, I said. Me too. Claire smiled, and I saw my own smile reflected back at me. Like, did you inherit Dad's inability to whistle? Because I've been trying my entire life, and I sound like a broken tea kettle. I laughed, a real laugh that felt like pressure releasing from my chest. Yes. Mom tried to teach me for years. She finally gave up and said it must be genetic. And do you get motion sick in cars? Because I can't read while riding in anything that moves. Oh my God, yes. Tyler used to tease me mercilessly about it on family road trips. We spent the next 2 hours comparing notes on everything from food preferences, to sleep habits, to childhood fears. The similarities were uncanny and comforting. For the first time in my life, I was talking to someone who shared my biology, who had inherited the same quirks and traits and predispositions. Can I ask you about Tyler? Claire said eventually. Michael mentioned that things were complicated with your adoptive family. I told her the whole story, from Tyler's cruel words in the kitchen, to the revelations at the will leading to our current careful truce. Claire listened without judgment, asking questions when she needed clarification. He called you adopted trash, she said, her voice sharp with anger. What an absolute asshole. He was angry and grieving, I said, though I was surprised to find myself defending Tyler even slightly. That's no excuse for cruelty like that. You didn't deserve to have your sense of belonging attacked. Claire's protective instincts reminded me of my own reaction when people tried to hurt the people I cared about. Another inherited trait, maybe. The ironic thing is that he was so worried about me not being real family, and it turned out I was more connected to the bloodline than he realized. Meanwhile, you're out there being actual biological family, and no one even knew you existed. Claire nodded thoughtfully. It's strange, isn't it? How much emphasis people put on blood relationships, when love and choice are really what make families work. Grandpa used to say that the best families are built on both blood and choice together. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. I think you would have liked him. And I think he would have loved knowing about you. We talked until late afternoon, when Claire finally said she needed to head back to her hotel to call her fiancé and let him know how the meeting had gone. As she was gathering her purse and jacket, she turned back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Emma, I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to feel pressured to say yes. Okay. I'm getting married in January. In Albuquerque. It's going to be a small ceremony, just close family and friends. I was wondering if you'd consider coming. Maybe bringing your parents, if they'd be willing to meet me. The invitation felt like a door opening, a chance to step into a relationship I'd never imagined having. I'd like that. I think Mom and Dad would like that too. Really. And Claire, I was wondering if you'd like to meet Michael together. If you're ready for that. Her face lit up with a mixture of hope and nervousness. You mean like both of us at the same time? His two daughters who found each other, despite all the complicated family history and secrets, and missed connections. I think it would mean the world to him. Claire nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes again. I think it would mean the world to me too. After she left, I sat in my office as the sun set outside the windows, thinking about the strange turns my life had taken over the past few months. I'd started the year as Emma Sullivan, adopted daughter struggling with questions about belonging and identity. I'd survived Tyler's attempt to erase my place in the family. I'd learned the truth about my biological connections. I'd inherited a business, and a legacy I'd never expected. And now I had a sister. A real biological sister, who shared my stubborn chin, and my inability to whistle, and my protective instincts. Someone who understood what it felt like to be Michael Sullivan's daughter, to carry the genetic legacy of a man who'd loved us enough to give us up when he couldn't care for us properly. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. How did the mysterious family visitor situation go? Mom said someone came by the office today. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. It was my sister. My biological sister. Michael's other daughter. The phone rang immediately. Are you serious? Tyler's voice was breathless. Completely serious. Her name is Claire, she's 6 months older than me, and she grew up in New Mexico. She came here to meet me. Holy shit, Emma. I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to swear, but holy shit, how are you feeling about this? The genuine concern in Tyler's voice was something I was still getting used to. The old Tyler would have made this about himself somehow, would have found a way to feel threatened or excluded. This Tyler, the one who was doing the work to become a better person, was focused on how I was handling the news. "I'm good," I said, realizing as I said it that it was true. "I'm really good. She's lovely, Tyler. She's smart and kind, and we have so much in common it's almost eerie. I think you'd like her. Are you going to stay in touch with her? She invited me to her wedding in January." "I'm going to go." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "That's amazing, Em. I'm happy for you. You deserve to have people in your life who see how special you are." The use of my childhood nickname, combined with the genuine warmth in his voice, made my throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you, that means a lot. For what it's worth, I'm proud of how you've handled everything this year. Grandpa was right to choose you. You've proven over and over that you know what family really means." After we hung up, I walked through the house that had been home to 3 generations of Sullivans, thinking about legacy and blood and choice. Grandpa's presence was everywhere in the details he'd cared about, the way he'd maintained the original hardwood floors, the garden he'd tended for 40 years, the photographs documenting decades of family history. But the house felt alive with possibility too, with the future I was building on the foundation he'd left me. Claire's business card was on the kitchen table, next to the blueprints for the sustainable housing project I was developing. 2 symbols of different kinds of inheritance, the sister I'd discovered and the business I was transforming. I picked up my phone and called Michael in Sacramento. "Emma?" He always answered my calls, like he couldn't quite believe I was really calling him. "Hi, Dad." The word still felt new in my mouth, but less foreign each time I used it. "I have something to tell you." "Is everything okay?" "Everything's more than okay. Claire came to see me today." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call might have dropped. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "She found you." "She found me. And she's incredible, Michael. She's smart and funny and kind, and she has your artistic hands and Grandpa's stubborn streak. You'd be so proud of the woman she's become." "Is she angry with me? For not being there, for not trying harder to be part of her life?" "She's not angry. She understands why you made the choices you did, and she wants to meet you if you're ready. We both do, together." Michael was crying now, trying to hide it but not quite succeeding. Both my girls want to meet me. Your girls who turned out pretty amazing despite having to grow up without you. Your girls who found each other across states and years and family secrets. Your girls who want to figure out how to be a family now, even though it's complicated and late, and probably going to take some work. "When?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Claire's getting married in January in Albuquerque. We were thinking maybe you could come to the wedding, and we could spend some time together before or after the ceremony. Meet your future son-in-law, see the life she's built, figure out how to be father and daughters together. I'd like that more than anything in the world." After we hung up, I made myself dinner in the kitchen where Tyler had tried to destroy my sense of belonging just a few months earlier. The same kitchen where I'd learned the truth about my identity, where I'd started the journey that led to this moment of sitting in my own house, in my own life, surrounded by the complex and beautiful reality of family that's built on both blood and choice. I thought about Grandpa's letter, about his words regarding the courage to stand in silence and refuse to disappear. I hadn't disappeared. Despite Tyler's attempt to erase me, despite years of not knowing my full story, despite all the secrets and complications and missed connections, I was still here. Still Emma Sullivan, adoptive daughter and biological granddaughter, and sister to both Tyler and Claire. The house settled around me with the comfortable sounds of home, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the antique clock, the gentle creak of wooden beams that had weathered decades of family life. Tomorrow I'd go back to running Grandpa's business, making decisions about construction projects and employee benefits and sustainable building practices. I'd continue the careful work of rebuilding my relationship with Tyler and building a new one with Claire. But tonight I just sat in my kitchen, in my house, in my life that had been shaped by so many people's choices to love me in whatever way they could manage. And I felt for the first time in months, completely and utterly at peace with who I was and where I belonged. The truth, as Grandpa had written in his letter, wasn't always a shout. Sometimes it was the quiet accumulation of love and choice, and commitment over time. Sometimes it was the courage to keep existing authentically, even when people tried to convince you that you didn't belong. And sometimes it was the grace to recognize that family can be complicated and imperfect, and still be the most precious thing you'll ever have. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.